Hello everyone, welcome to the 17th webinar in 12D's training webinar series. My name is Lisa Stewart and I'm the Marketing and Communications Coordinator at 12D Solutions. 12D's training webinars showcase common industry challenges, taking a close look at industry best practices and how these can be implemented using 12D model software. The aim of these webinars is to upskill 12D model users and broaden their understanding of the capabilities of 12D model. We run these webinars regularly and record them for posting through our website and on YouTube. The first 16 webinars from this training series, as well as the first 19 webinars from our Industry Solutions series, are available on YouTube if you missed those. During this live presentation, you'll be able to type your questions along the way, as shown on the screen, and we'll answer as many as possible throughout the webinar. At the end, I'll also read out some of your questions to the presenter for his insights if there's time. Today's webinar, 12D Design Fundamentals, an Introduction to the MTF, will be presented by Rod Burns, who does 12D training and support at Extra Dimension Solutions. Rod has 18 years of experience in highway and land development, plus various civil infrastructure projects around Australia and the UK. This session will be looking at the basic design concepts which 12D model software utilises for civil design. It's intended as an introduction to the MTF, the Modifiers and Templates File, and will cover the structure and some of the most commonly used commands and tools available to users. Over to you, Rod.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for joining me, everybody, this afternoon. So basically just an introduction or looking at the basics menus within 12D in the MTF file. I will be doing it in version 12, but obviously the menus are all there in version 11 also. You might have noticed there was quite a lot of changes in 11, so a lot of different design methodologies if you wanted to use those, and 12 basically just builds on those and continues on in the same line, so there's a lot of other possibilities and mixtures you can do there also. So we'll be looking at those. Starting, I guess, right at the very start, for any sort of civil works, we basically need three sort of key ingredients. First one being a tin. I basically just say these are like the Lego blocks you need to start off with. So basically, yeah, a tin or triangulation to get started. Ground surface, a super elevation with some horizontal and vertical geometry. And the third part, the important part, is either having a template or now we're moving into snippets also, which will basically provide the design strings and links that are required. And this is where we're going to spend most of the time today. I'm not going to be talking much about the tins at all. Hopefully you're pretty well across those and how to create those and edit those as you need to. The super alignments, they can be, the parts can be defined in various methods. We often start with the basic intersection point or IP method for the design. And as you sort of develop your design skills, you might move across to the parametric design as it's known, or element method. I call it, again, a bit of the Lego box where you start to join the different parts of the geometry together. And you can also do a mixture of the two. And when you throw in the computators and the speed tables, and now you can make the super alignment into pipes and culverts and a whole lot of other stuff, the super alignment is a very powerful tool and one that you should be hopefully quite across. There's other webinars that do cover the super alignment in quite detail as well, so I suggest you go and have a look at those as well. Now the templates, as I said, we'll be spending a fair bit of time in the templates and actually modifying them as well. They've been in 12D since really early in the beginning of 12D. They're simply a collection of design links or strings, and you get to choose whether you apply them to the left-hand side or right-hand side of the road. And you can then also interpolate between changes or templates as well to form up shapes as you need to. All the template information lives in the same area within 12D under Design Templates. Obviously you can create and edit them here. You can copy and rename them if you need to. But the important one I find is actually being able to output them and then re-input them to another project. So if you do have an office standard and you do come up with some standard templates, you're actually able to migrate these from project to project and reuse them again and again as you need to. The way the templates work, they obviously start when you come up and you create a new template with the fixed elements that you want to put in there, or the fixed links, and this is where you basically put in the geometry you wish. We're going to be doing a road design, but it could be a rail or a car park. It doesn't really matter. You basically put in the geometry in terms of the width and either the height or the crossfall, and it defines these strings or link names. Basically, with any of them, you only need two values in terms of the width or the height, or the width and the crossfall. And you can see with pavement areas often used for crossfalls, where the curb and gutter shape you might use a width and a height. But But the more important thing is that each link or string is relative to the previous one. And what I'm saying there is that if I was to introduce some super elevation or adjust this to be a positive 3% here, then all the links that follow, all these strings that follow, would also jump up and would now follow that new position. Being fixed basically means as the center line goes up and down the hills or around the left and right corners and things like that, this shape is absolutely fixed in place. You're the boss, so 12D will just follow out these commands as you've typed in there. A bit more on the link, I guess, and just so that you really understand that you only need 2 of these values, is that the new point that you're going to produce is linked off the previous one with the link there, and you only need either 2 of those answers to produce those. In terms of modifying them or changing them later, if you were to change the width, you have to have a think about whether, when I change the width of the road, do I want to maintain the height? In that case, the height would be maintained and it would come across, and the crossfall would actually increase. Or if you were to maintain the width change the width and maintain the crossfall, then basically it would maintain that crossfall as it gets widened out. So it's just an observation, or just so you keep in the back of your mind that that's what's happening with each of the links. We're going to be staying with that, but there is the possibility also with 12D that you can also insert links absolutely from other points or other string positions, and it actually doesn't have to be in the design surface. It can actually be in the air for whatever reason. It might be actually underneath the pavement to form your boxing surfaces. So it doesn't actually have to be in that plane, in that cross section. It could be up or below, but you still need 2 of the 3 answers to get there. Now when the template's created, it does basically follow through the menus from left to right. It produces all the fixed strings or links. It goes through decisions, cut, fill, and then it gets into the final battering where it'll do the final cut and fill slopes for you. They are fairly simple to create and edit them if you need to, but they're quite powerful with these decisions where the 12D will actually go through, and if you've coded it so it actually knows about different rock stratas or different situations, the templates can adjust themselves automatically for you as it goes. The only problem we get into is that if you actually want to modify the links or change them, if the roads get wider or narrow or change in super elevation, then this is where the templates are sort of too fixed in place, and that's why the modifiers, or the MTF file, the modifiers template file, was introduced to then go and adjust the links as we need to. Where we put the 3 bits of the jigsaw puzzle together, the tin and the super alignment and the templates all together, all happens under design, apply. And there are other tools in here as well that are quite useful. The interface tool, where you might actually just say, look, I want to go from a string down to a tin at a specific slope, and this will just do the final battering for you. So that's in that position also under the design apply. And there's also the design apply template. This is a simpler method that we're not going to get into today. We're going to go into the apply MTF, but this one sort of is very similar in terms of that it needs the tin, it needs the reference string or the super alignment, and here you get a choice of the left-hand side, a template, or a right-hand side to run a template down. So this one basically uses those 3 parts of the jigsaw puzzle to run the shape for you. Every version of 12D can run that without any problem, and just run the templates down on the side you choose. Where we're going to be spending the time is on the bigger panel, I guess, on the apply MTF, and I think probably 90% of the time, even more so, possibly the designers go straight into this one. It's very similar to the apply template. It needs the same inputs in terms of survey, the reference string or super alignment, but this one is actually replacing the templates with this MTF file. Now the MTF file, or the modifiers and templates file, is literally just a notepad file in the background, and I'll open up one of those and show you how crazy it looks. You don't usually want to look at it in notepad because it's just pretty boring, really. 12D built a nice interface for it, and it's much easier and much nicer to use it through the interface. So I'm going to go through and basically create a little parking bay to start off with. So that's what I'm hoping to be able to produce for you, but we're going to start right from scratch, load everything up and do a couple of modifiers for you and show you how all the different tools and the parts of the MTF file work, because there's quite a couple of commands in there. I'll just skip across into 12D. As you can see, this project already has a tin loaded into it, and for the surface there, so it's already got some survey in there. I've already got my center line, and this is the road I'm going to produce. It's reference string 01, or road number 1. It runs from the northeast down to the south here, and you can see it's already got some vertical geometry on that also. So it's just saving a bit of time having to set that up. The templates, yep, in the job I've already loaded again, saving a bit of time, some templates. There's one for the road on the left-hand side, and you can see here all the links are in there as per the PowerPoint. And there is one there also for the right-hand side. The difference being just that third character, whether it was left or right, and that sometimes helps with boxing when you come to do the subgrade design as well. So I'll just push these menus across to the side. I'll come back to them and refer back to them as we go. But there are three parts. They're already set up, ready to go. I'm going to come in under Design, Apply, and I'm going to make an Apply MTF or an MTF function here. You'll notice straight away it comes up and the reference string is highlighted red, and it's probably the best way to start is actually to go and select your center line or your reference string there. By selecting your reference string, the programmers will take the name of the string automatically and make that into the function name by default. It just saves you having to type. The other thing it does is it actually makes the MTF file, your Modifiers Templates little notepad file, named exactly the same as well. So we get consistency in the naming. You'll notice the other tabs at the moment, they're all still blank. So what a key thing is, if you want to change the function name, you can, but you come up behind the function, get your cursor flashing and hit enter. And that just saves a whole lot of typing. The programmers then say, okay, that's the name that you wanted, and it will then populate the rest of the panels, the rest of the tabs on the panel with that name. So the RSO1 got carried through to all the other tabs. Now I need to put in the other parts of the jigsaw puzzle there, is the tin, the survey tin there, or triangulation. And I need to create an MTF file. Now if I click on the little yellow folder here for my notepad files, you'll notice in the list of my MTFs here I don't actually have one for RSO1. I've got one for the other roads, but not currently created for this. So because it's not created, I can actually come down to the word open, and the programmers might think I'm a little bit crazy because I'm going to try and open a file, a notepad file that actually doesn't exist. So they'll say, hey, did you actually want to create one of these? And again, it's a bit of a shortcut. Because that way I don't have to actually fill in the center line, and the MTF file's still got the same name already typed in there. I don't have to type anything at all, makes it a little bit easier. As soon as I hit create, that notepad file is generated, and it's now giving you the pretty interface that 12D likes you to use. I guess it's much easier to do it this way. Walking through them, the hinge, not a lot of users actually use the hinge string much. It's often used by rail designers and things. If you're specialised in that, you might want to dive into the hinge a bit more. Most of the time is spent in the modifiers left and right, related to the left-hand side of the road and the right. The boxing actually refers back to the other layers if you're doing some subgrade design. I'm not going to be doing any, so I'm just going to highlight these couple of rows here, do a right mouse button and clear those out. I also like to have all my polygons in the one layer or model together, so I just basically take off that extension so that all the answers, all the strings generated will go into the same layer model. And I'll come back to here, and under the modifiers left and right, we've got recal. Come down here, more and settings. Well, the more things are often used only once. You might set something in there, but they're typically only set once for a road if they're needed at all. At this stage, again, in the introduction side of things, you probably won't be using very many things in there at all. This is where if you were using the old templates loading way of doing it, you would come into more and load the template on the left or right side of the road. But we're now saying to people, and it's a lot easier to follow as people's design if you actually put them in the modifier left and right, which is the way I'm going to do it. Under settings, again, there's more tick boxes and things like that. Again, probably 99% of the times you won't have to touch any of that. Maybe you've got a 12D administrator in the office there that will set things up and change or configure it if he needs to. But most of the time you can just come straight into modify left, and this is where I tell 12D what the templates are I want to run in this function. So I get the left side up here, you can see it's all blank, there's no commands loaded at the moment, so I just double click in the commands or the type of commands that I want. I come under fixed, under insert, and I want to insert my full template. And it'll then give me a list of all the templates, little ABC templates here, that are available within the current project. You can see the same list over here in my templates. So I just say yes on the left-hand side. I want to run the left-hand side of the road. Thanks very much. Go OK there. And you can actually open up the modify the right-hand side at the same time if you want. You can cheat and copy from the left to the right. I'll do that again a bit later. But I'll just come in under fixed, insert, and insert the full template again. And you can see here, I've got my template for the right-hand side. So I'll just go OK on all of this. And so it shuts all the panels down and it saves all those answers away, but it actually hasn't saved the MTF file. What's really important is because this is just an external notepad file, you have to come across and hit save there, or again, a little trick if it's a little bit easier to get to, up the top, the word where the MTF file name is, that actually is a button also. So you can actually save it at the top or the bottom, whichever is easiest to get to. But now I'm pretty well ready to run it within my function. I'm just going to quickly check the other tabs and see if I haven't missed anything. Models. Miscellaneous, mine's been set up a little bit different in that I'm running a map file. You might have noticed they're pretty easy to create. I'm just going to open this one up so you can see it. You might have noticed that with my templates over here, I actually used all the pretty 12D visualization colors, which will basically make the tin and the visualization exactly, concretes and asphalt colors and nice and pretty. But in terms of the plan presentation, I actually want the curb lip and the curb top and things to be specific colors for my plan presentation, for what I want to put out on my drawings. So basically this will do the best of both worlds, that I'll get my colors for the visualization and we'll then map the string colors back to these colors so I can produce my plans at the same time. And you can see a little question mark is just so that it takes care of the templates or those strings that are generated on the left hand side, or if it was an R, it would still generate it as a yellow string as well. So that was just being loaded in there automatically. So that's the map file that I've got loaded in there. The tin, why not? I'll create a tin for my road as well, but I don't really, at this point in time, I'm not really interested in creating plots, long section plots and cross section plots. I'll skip the tadpoles as well. I don't need any of those at this stage. So really there's not much to fill out to get this to run. I should simply come down to the bottom and hit apply. Now what I'm looking for there, you can see that the report that's been generated, a text file report, and what I'm really interested in are these numbers. If I get some numbers that I know it's worked, the natural surface to the design, and I get the amount of cut, the amount of fill, and the balance between the cut and fill. Now, those numbers might be good or bad, depending on what your situation is, but any numbers are a good thing because it means that it's actually worked. And if I come back, I can then plus on or add in the cross sections and my design RS, these models that have been generated, and that's where the strings have been added into. So you can see them there. Now every time you hit the word apply, you might notice that it'll, yes, I'll remove the report, yep, and it'll basically blink and the design gets completely deleted and gets regenerated again. And there's my report file again, hiding over there. I'll close that down. So yeah, it's a pretty big panel, but once it's up and running, the programmers have made it a lot simpler, I guess, is the fact that on this little notepad file, the MTF file, they've actually got the word recalc. And if I click recalc here, it does the same thing as running the function. It actually does the apply for you. It just means that you actually don't need to have this big panel open the whole time. So once it's up and running and you're happy with where it is at that point in time, you can finish and you can just keep recalculating it here. And you'll notice that as you do that, you have to look down the bottom here, but the natural surface to the design volumes will appear down the bottom. You can see them popping up there to show you what the new volumes were. If I was to adjust the vertical, obviously the numbers would be different. All right, so that's what we've got going so far. I'm going to come in now and build a bit more onto now that it's all up and running, I'm going to come into the MTF file on the left-hand side and add some more commands in. Now you'll notice that the way I like my workspace to be set up, I like the modifiers to be over here possibly, and my plan all set up. And I can insert a couple of more rows in here and you'll adjust it. But if you hit OK and open it a second time, it'll be small and in the old position. Now there's a bit of a trick or a tip in here that if you do adjust it and make it the size that you want it to be, if you hit the word finish, and it's not often that you do hit the word finish because it's normally the apply or a K there, but if you do hit the word finish, the programmers will actually remember the position that the panel was in last time. So you don't have to keep adjusting it, and if you're over dual monitors, you can actually have that set up on a second monitor and the panel will appear on the second one. So it just depends on how you like to work your setup, but that's how I like to set mine up, and it's a good tip to know. In the background, and this happens with all the menus, so if this one's in the wrong spot, you can adjust the position of it. Again, hit the word finish. When I open it again, it's now remembered the new position of where it was. What's happening in the background is a new file's been generated called MTF panel sizes, and in there is the location of where these panels were. Because everyone will have different setups or work setups, the way they like to position their workspace. So yeah, you can actually take that file from project to project if you like for yourself, and it will be set up for your dual monitor setup the way you like to work. I'm going to just go through some of the buttons on the right hand side. I'll just quickly go through adding some more commands in here just quickly. But to bring in some more commands, you just again select double click or double left mouse button click in the type, and it brings up these lists here. Now it shouldn't be too surprising because we've loaded the template in already, but the commands to modify the template are set up very similar as the template itself. Remember, we had fixed, and in the template we also had decision, cut, fill, and the final. So if you did want to come in and adjust the final slope for a batter, a cut batter, it would mean coming into the modifier on the left-hand side of the road here. You come under the template, into the final part of the template, which is where you can then adjust that cut slope if you want it to be 1-in-1 or whatever number you want it to be. So these modifiers are directly linked back to the template, and any answers that were specified in the template, in the fixed part of the template, which is hiding over here, when I come in and start to modify these strings, essentially, what happens is that 12D goes back to the original answer and then just adjusts what it needs to, and this really is where the power of the MTF file is that it gets the strings to dance up and down and in and out as you need to. And all it does is it links back to the template each time, all those original answers that you had specified in the template. Now these commands, so that's the first two, I guess, that just link directly back to the template and the fixed strings that might be produced there. Interval, that's basically referring to the chainage intervals. So if you wanted additional intervals, different chainages or something like that, at the moment in the function we ran for that road number 1, the chainages were every 5 meters, which is fine, but there might be a case where you want the intervals to be a lot finer for some reason. So you could change the interval there. So these intervals are just related to chainages. The create is basically for creating additional strings, or as you can see, tins, and shapes are referring to the tri-meshes or solids that 12D now produces. And obviously you can give those extra attributes as well. So you could produce a solid and say, yes, this is a curb and gutter and it happens to be concrete. Or you can actually give it those extra attributes or properties that will then export out to your BIM project. So that's how you can actually add or create those extra elements as well. Under more, we hope you don't have to go here too often, but you can then start to debug your modifiers as it runs through. And you can also pause. If you had lots of lines of modifiers, you could actually pause at a certain point so that it would run down to that point and to stop, and you can start to debug them. If you have any issues with your modifiers on the left or the right side of the road, the clear window essentially refers to the output window. Would come in and clear any output window messages you might have, and so that it could then report anything after that possibly, so you'd only just get the current errors. Not that we should be having errors, but yes, that's what it would do, just clear the output window. The snippet sits at the highest level here because it can actually include things that come from the fixed part of the template, or the interval, or the creating of tri-meshes and things like that. So that sits at this very high level because it can call on any of these other commands. The comments, well, they're gold in two ways. I mean that. Basically, I think you should be paid more money if you put comments in. So I'm just going to put in here a quick comment. And you'll notice that, yes, those highlight very brightly in yellow, so you can actually see which ones are comments that a fellow user might have put in there for you, and it just gives you an idea of what's happened with the coding below it. So they're definitely a must. To put more and more comments, just make your life easier. And then we also have regions as well. The regions are, I guess they're sort of like comments. I'll just put some in here. Design surface. I'll put another one down the bottom here so you can see it. Put subgrade, or some people like to refer it to as boxing. But subgrade design. And you'll notice that they're light blue in color, but the cool thing with the regions is with this little negative button here, we're actually able to collapse the regions. So actually able to hide the code that you don't want to see between those regions themselves. So that actually makes it a lot easier to manipulate. And if you have lots of modifiers, a couple of months back I was in a client's office, and one of the gentlemen had over 300 lines on the left-hand side of their highway that they were doing. It was a long highway, obviously 10 kilometres or more, and yeah, had lots and lots of modifiers, and being able to hide them definitely made his life a lot easier. Now the buttons down the right-hand side that we have here just allow us to play with some of those. If you get some code in the wrong order, you can obviously move that code up and down. and produce it into a new area if you need to. So you don't have to delete it and start again. You can just adjust its position so that it logically works through. Obviously, the big red X button is always good to be able to delete things. Up and down, obviously insert above and insert below. Or if you're used to Excel and you think about these cells a little bit like Excel, you can actually highlight a number of rows, do a right mouse button, insert, or more so, you might want to delete a whole bunch of rows in one go as well. So that's another way you can do it, a bit like Excel, I guess. Other buttons here, we've got referring to region. We can talk about the previous region, and it'll jump up or down to each of the regions as it will step through your MTF file. The region's name, it'll actually come up with whatever you've typed in for the region. So you can click on one and go directly to that region. Or similar, in a similar vein, is the comments. It'll actually, if you have put any comments in there, you could jump directly to where that comment is as well. So you can just quickly scroll through and get to the correct area of your modifiers. So they're the buttons on the right-hand side, and just shows, I guess, makes it a little bit easier to access the modifiers as you need to get into them. I'm going to put in another alias at the top. I've seen a lot of users starting to do this. They put another region right at the top called alias. An alias is essentially a chainages, special chainages or intervals that you might want to keep. We set them at the top, and then all the other lines of modifiers below can then access those chainages automatically. So I have seen a lot of people, they actually live under this chainage interval, the aliases, because it is related to the chainages. And we just need to give the alias a name. What I'm going to do is actually going to give this a word called just extents. This is going to be the extents of where I want the template to run, or where my road's going to run, down to the end of the job here. You can see at the moment it's actually running to the end of the reference string. No, actually where I want it to go is to the end of the curve return. So I'm just going to come in here, extents, and instead of, start at the start of the reference string, but I want it to end not at the end of the center line. I actually want it to end where this chainage is here. So I could come in here and guess, and there's lots of different methods in here for selecting chainages. By default, a lot of people have put in typed, and I guess I could guess a chainage, 322 or something like that. I don't suggest that people guess, that's a bad idea. There is a little C button here to measure the chainage, and that will actually allow you to do it on the fly. So I can actually come and pick up that tangent point of the curve return, getting the diamond, so I know I've got the exact end point of that string there, the last vertex on that string. And I could lock in the exact chainage, so it's not so much a guess anymore. But the problem with having a chainage in there or locked in place is that if the road gets longer, if your center line gets longer, or the curve return changes, then we're stuck with that value. And really what we want to do is make this as dynamic as possible. You might have seen that in some of the other webinars. So what the choices are, and there's a lot of other choices to pick chainages here, I can actually lock it into the start of this curve return. So if I say, look, I want it to be related to this string, I want 12D to know about this curve return, you can see there that the name curve return, reference string curve return number 9, it will then come down to basically the start of where that string is. I hit apply there, and you can see it's jumped down again to that tangent point there. So it now knows about that. So that's set up the extents of where my road is. Now for all the other modifiers, I actually don't need to pick that curve return again when it comes down to where the templates are. I can actually tell the templates to say, look, use this alias. And one of the other chainages in, I can just actually say, use the start of this alias. And you can see the column there with the aliases in there, the alias called extent. And the end would be the same. I want it to end where the end is the end of the alias. The alias end, and pick the extents again. So what that basically tells 12D is you want to pass this end extent chainage down into this field here. So I don't actually have to pick that curve return twice or 3 or 6 times later on throughout the left-hand side of that modifier. So I can just set that once, and I can hit apply. And a lot of users ask me this, why is there 2 buttons on all these panels? Why is there an OK and apply? Well, they're sort of similar. The OK will save the answers and minimize the panel. The apply will actually apply the answer, but basically keeps the panel open in case you would want to adjust it for whatever reason. But the apply is also quite handy that over on this panel over here, instead of having to come over and actually recalculate it all every time, if you tick on the auto recalc, now what happens is it becomes live that any time I hit the apply here or here, it will go back and regenerate the function again. And you can see it's now rerun everything, and it will do it every time I hit the word apply. It just runs it automatically. All the strings got deleted and reapplied, and it now knows to chop it off at the curb return there. So that's a couple of the smart changes. I'm going to use a couple more, but I want to get in and make this parking bay for us. So I'm going to come up here. Again, being a good user, I'm going to put in a comment before I do this, so when you come back in a couple of weeks' time and you look at it, you'll know what I'm talking about. This is going to be my parking bay. And I'm going to put in a couple more rows in here so we can give us some space. Now the parking bay I want to run, well, I could just nominate changes for it to happen over. But what I'm going to do is just quickly draw in a string. It just has to be doesn't really matter what the color is, but it just has to be a uniquely named string in a model. I'll give it a bit of width here. And I'll just draw it off the side here, you can see. And that's going to be the length of my parking bay. I think that's a good idea. And while I'm here, I'll also turn on the vertice. And this is all the vertex numbers. I'll right mouse button there and turn those on. And you can so you can see that was point 1 and point 2. That's the start of the string, and that's the end, the direction of it. That will become important as I get in. So that's the length of the parking. Now when I put the parking in, what I wanted to do is put some line marking in. So I'm going to actually, where we went before and we inserted the full template, what I actually can do is just insert a new string. So it'd be like coming across to the template that we have and we've inserted here and coming in and say, look, I want a new string in here, and basically typing in the values. And if I come across, fixed, insert here, it asks exactly the same questions. Whoops, open that up again. Asks exactly the same questions here. It says, okay, what's the link or the string that you want to name here? And I know that's going to match my string naming convention for some line marking. I'm going to keep the pretty colors. These will be mapped back and given a line style and things, but I need to again put in the width, height, or crossfall, which match the 3 columns across the top here. So I know the width that I want is 3.5, the crossfall I want is -3, and then it asks you, and it's optional, it's grayed out, so you don't have to put an answer in here, but it's basically asking you where in the list of your template or the strings do you want to insert this new one. Now I want mine to go before, as I did, I came across and I went insert above or before. I want it to go before the curb lip on the left. So I can actually KLL, put that in there, and now 12D will know where in the list of the strings to actually place this string. If I left it blank, what 12D would do is actually put it right at the very end, because there wouldn't be anything before or after. It would actually just tack it on to the end of all the other strings in that fixed part of the template. But I definitely want it into that section there. So that's where I'm going to go there. And I need to kill that line, and that's all happy. Now if I just apply that, boom, it's going to apply it over the whole chainage range. That's going to be a lot of parking. So I don't basically, not exactly what I was after. So what I'm going to do is come in, I'm going to again use some of the smart chainage to use the start of this other string. So I've said this is the parking bay length I want, and you can see it's actually pulled the number, the name, and the model name from there and loaded in. It knows about that string now. And I pick in the end there as well, and it now knows about the end. So if I apply it, happy days, the parking bay is just over that area. And if that string happened to adjust, get longer or shorter, this is again where the smart changes come in, because I haven't coded a hard change in there. It will just automatically readjust itself to the new length that it needs to be. So because I've picked that string, start and other, they're pretty good tools, but if you were to draft this and accidentally come in, something might happen, you might accidentally reverse it, which now means that you can see that's point number 1, that's point number 2. I've reversed the string. Well, if I try and apply it, this is going to get really confused, because the start of the string will be past the end, and it'll be trying to go backwards, and 12D will get a little bit confused. It does throw up an error message for you straight away saying, hey, these changes are out of order. And it actually tells you you're in the left-hand side modifiers, which we are, and it's line 7 where the error is. So pretty quick, and the fact that I've got the panel open, it pretty quick shows you, hey, there's something going on here. I'm just going to need to go and check out that line of code and see what's happening there. So the programmer has given us a couple of other choices, well, many more, but the one rather than just using the start or the end of the string, a little bit safer, what we could do is use the lowest or highest. And what that does is when I pick the string again, it basically goes and locks in the string, the highest chainage in here, and it basically drops both the start and the end across, and this will always be the lowest chainage number, and the highest will always be this one, because there's only two answers it can be, and that will always be the higher end at the end chainage. So now it's not relative so much on the direction of this string. It's basically going to drop both answers and will give you whichever answer is needed to be taken. So it's a little bit cleverer, I guess, than picking the start and the end, especially if it was to be redrawn or adjusted or reversed later on. The other thing I could do is also give these changes, because I've picked this string, I can actually give it another alias in here. So these changes, they all live together here, and I can actually give it a little alias name here, or just say parking. And you'll see that again, that word parking will then pop up in the alias column, and I can then reuse these strings, the start of that string and the end of that string again and again, without actually having to pick that string multiple times. Now the other commands, there are a lot of commands in here, no doubt, but most of the time you'll find yourself in the fixed part of the modifiers, and the usual 80-20 rule that everyone talks about, the modifier, the link, is probably the go-to command. Out of all of them at all, I would say you'd probably use this one 20% of the time, because this is the one that will modify all these links that we were talking about, and will actually make them in terms of modifying the width, the height, or the crossfall. So it comes back to saying, hey, which are the numbers you want to change, and then also what do you want to hold. So if I was to change the width of the road, I can then maintain the 3% crossfall. Or if I was to change the crossfall, you might actually want to hold the width so that it does hold the lane width of 3.5 meters. So it just relates back to the template again, and these three options that you have with height, crossfall, or slope or crossfall, same. All right, so that's how they link together. I think I can finish on that for now. Come across, these panels are all set up exactly the same way, and the first thing that it asks about is basically, do you know the link you want to adjust? That's the very first thing it wants to know. In my case, it's pretty simple. It's this yellow string. At the moment, it's the parking bay is sort of 3.5 meters wide, and I'm going to bring it in a little bit. I'm going to taper it in a bit, so it's only 3 meters worth of parking, and I'll do some transitions at the start and the end also. But first of all, to set it up, I need to tell it the link name I want to adjust. So I come across to the field, and I can just middle mouse button click, and then select the string off the screen, and again have a look, make sure I've got the right one, yes, and accept it again. So by hovering over the panel, I guess, or that field where you want the answer to go, you can just go middle mouse button on the wheel of your mouse, and then select a string off the screen and accept it. And you'll notice that it has the word link with the S, basically meaning you can actually modify one or more strings with this command. And that's quite typical. If you were doing a super elevation change and you had multiple lanes, you might want to change the crossfall of 2 lanes at the same time, or 2 strings at the same time. So you are able to do that. The programmer will put these little quotations around your string, because you can actually call the string curb lip left or something like that. And because 12D is space delimited, it might think that that's 3 individual strings. But the fact that it's wrapped up in inverted commas, 12D knows that, hey, no, that's all one name. Most users do keep their names sort of abbreviated, just so that it's a bit more sensible, I guess, like that, or a bit easier to follow. But you can actually pick them straight from the screen, so you don't actually have to type in anything in there. So I definitely want to modify the width. I'm going to hold the crossfall of the road, and the width that I want is going to be 3 meters, 3.0, or whatever you want in there. Where I want this to happen is, again, without having to pick that string, that bus bay string, or sorry, the parking bay string that I put in there, I can actually come in and I can actually say relative to the alias again. And I can pick up this parking alias that we set up earlier. Parking at the start and the parking chainage at the end. And I apply that. And you'll notice, you might not have noticed it because it's a very small change. Let me make it wider, 8 meters, and apply it. But it's basically just happening over that chainage range again, and I don't actually have to pick that string again. It's just passing the start chainage, the start alias chainage down, and the end alias of the parking down into this field here. So it means I don't have to fill out as many things. 8 meters is a bit adventurous. Go back to 3. Now to do the taper, well, we use the same idea. We're going to modify that string. But instead of this time, we're going to go into fixed, modify the link again. It's the same link, so it's the same lip of curb string that I'm adjusting. But this time, instead of changing the width and just having one width all the way, I actually want to say I want two widths. So the width at the start, if I zoom in a little bit here, the width at the start I actually want it to be 0. And by the time I get to the width at the end, so I look at these and think with the little arrow in there, that's the start answer and that's the end answer in terms of the change of where this is going to happen along my alignment. So the start width is going to be 0 and the end width is going to be my 3 meters. Now where is this going to happen? I guess along my full alignment. Again, I can use those aliases. The alias that I've set up with the parking, if I use that, the start of the parking will be the parking. And the cool thing is I can actually use the alias start of the parking twice. Let's pick it a second time because it's got this extension reference. And what it's basically saying is like, take the change off the reference of the start. And I can add on the distance that I want this transition to happen over. So over 10 meters, I want this transition to happen. I hit apply, and you can see it's done exactly that. It's done the transition over 10 meters directly for me there. So I don't actually, again, have to hard code any changes. It's taken the start change from the start of the string, and then it's just essentially added 10 meters to the start of that string as well, which actually happens to be based off a string out here. It's fairly random, but it means that, again, I can actually come in and move it, make it longer or shorter, adjust it, and then as soon as I hit apply, boom, the transition and all the parking just gets lengthened because it's based off this point out here in space. I also need a transition at the end, and you will find these modifiers often happen in groups of 3. So the first one set up the width, or possibly if you're doing super, it would set up the super that you want. You do a transition at the start, and then you might have to transition it at the end as well. So you will find you'll actually do these often in groups of 3. And again, you need the same command, just a little bit in reverse. In terms of I pick the link again, the same string. I come in, I tell it the 2 widths, and this time the width at the start would be 3, and by the time I get to this end change where the parking is going to end, I'm going to have a change, or sorry, a width of 0. I put 3 in there and 0 in there. Again, the change range, if you think about the changes, I want the end change to be the end of the parking, which again, we can use the alias. And again, to make it a little bit easier, the start of this taper is I'm going to use the end alias again a second time. Pick the end part, so it knows about the parking end change here, but I'm going to actually step back with this relative change extension. It can actually extend back along the reference another 10 meters, and the start will be 10 meters before the end, and obviously the end is the end. So there we go, there's our taper at the end there. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward for you. It did introduce you, I guess, to a couple of these, but there's a lot more options in here, and these are the ones I also wanted to cover. Hopefully you're feeling pretty comfortable now with the smart changes, some of them at least, and the fact that you can actually go backwards and forwards and use just one common change mark or point and reference backwards and forwards from that as well. It's quite flexible. These other options we have in here, again, the programmer has gone to a lot of effort to put these in so that we don't have to fill out as many things in the panels. This idea of pos is just short for the word position. So if I actually make this inactive, there's a little active box here. If I untick it and hit apply, you'll notice that this line of code has gone red, which basically means that when 12D processes my coding, it actually just ignores that line completely, like it's not there. And I wanted to do that just to show you that currently, before this command is actually run, the current position out here, I'm actually happy with. So this pos is this position where it currently is. I'm actually happy with that width. So the position at the start is correct, but the width at the end is not. I actually need to type a number in there. If it was all working correctly, I could actually use pos to pos, and I wouldn't actually have to type in any numbers at all, and it would just do the transition for me automatically. That's quite nice. But mine's not quite set up that way. I've got a width at the start I'm happy with, but I need to type a 0 answer at the back there. So I come in and say, look, the position at the start change is correct, but the width at the end is not correct. I need to type a number in there as 0. And you'll notice that it does the same thing. Oh, I've caught myself out. It happens all the time. I forgot to make that command active again. So you'll notice if I hit apply, it's black again, and the transitions worked. And it looks exactly the same as when I typed in the 2 widths. The benefit of doing this is that if I was to come back to my first modifier, where I actually set up the width of the parking bay and said, look, actually now they're going to come in and park nose in, it needs to be 5.5 meters. Well, that would become the new position when it gets passed down to here. that became the new position, the 5.5 answer, that it then tapers down to 0. This transition, where we actually hard-coded in the numbers, is now, well, not correct. And I'd have to open this box up, this part of the panel open, and actually type in the new answer in here. So it would have been a lot smarter if I had come in here, spent another second or two and thought about it and actually said, yep, I'm actually happy with the position at the end, that width is correct, but the start, again, I'll show you what it looks like before this one runs. You'll notice that it's pushed all the way out. So yeah, I'm happy with the position there, but the position at the start, I need it to be pulled in. So yep, happy with the position at the end, but I need a width at the start here. So I just give it a width of 0, apply it, and caught myself again, apply it on there, and it does the taper for me. There's lots of other options on here, different types, and they've got positions in here, and there's a lot of other options in here. Some of these other ones you actually do need to put calculations in for. So you can imagine with this one, it's going to do a reverse curve for me. It's quite nice, it does some reverse curves. But you do need, because you've specified the length that the transition is going to happen over, you also need to tell it the width that it's going to happen over so that 12D can do the geometry correctly. So you do need some inputs with this one, but it's quite happy to do it. And because the intervals are currently 5 meters, you might want to increase the interval or the change interval there, make it 1 meter, and if I apply it, you'll notice that you start to get this back-to-back. I should have put 5.5 in there. That was the new answer. And you'll see that 12D will do that back-to-back radiuses in there, or reverse curves. There's other ones in here as well that you might want to play around with. Circular does a nice, basically, circular shape out there, and a lot of highway designers are using that for the shoulder flaring for guardrails and things like that. So that's the circular going forward, or we could go back the other way, circular in the reverse direction, and actually do a different shape again. All lots of different possibilities in here. The cubic formula, the sinusoidal. I think the programmers, being mathematicians and engineers, they've basically put every mathematical formula you can think of in there so that it covers everyone's bases. You might be in that unlucky 1 percentile person one day that you might need one of those, but they're all there. Hopefully they'll cover every base that you ever can think of. So the one I do want, I'm happy with the position, but I need to change the width at the start. So I'll go back to that one, hit apply there, and that's all working for me. No problem at all. So that modify link command is probably the one that's used, as I said, I've said it before, is used probably 80% of the time. That's the one that gets the strings to go in and out, up and down, and you're basically just adjusting each of the strings as you need to. The other command that's probably used most is, I've got another CAD string drawn in here already, is I've got a bus bay drawn down here, is where you've actually already drawn in the shape that you want. You can draw it in 12D, or you might have brought the shape over from CAD. And I'm going to basically design a bit of a bus bay down here. So I'll just scroll down here, put in another comment, bus bay in here, and the command is under fixed, modify to and to a string. And basically it's saying to 12D, look, I've got a string there I want to use to. I want to modify my current string out and use this string as a guide. So this is probably the one that's used next the most. In this one, we basically, again, up the top, the first thing it asks for is, okay, what string is it that you wish to adjust, the length that you want, and that's for us is this lip of curb. Again, and now how do you want to modify it? In my case, I just want to modify it and actually hold the crossfall. And you can see there, modify the width and hold the crossfall just as we had in the earlier modify link panel. They're all exactly the same. So once you get a feel for these modifiers and you open up other modifier types, the format's exactly the same. So it's quite handy and pretty easy to follow once you start to use some of them. So that's the one I want. So that will adjust the width. It'll hold the crossfall out of the template or out of the snippet. There is one down the bottom here, modify width, height, and crossfall. This will actually take off this string if it had some vertical. It would actually also adjust the string in terms of the plan position, but also vertically as well. It would adjust the height or the crossfall to match that string. It's used quite a bit by councils along the property boundary edges, where the surveyor's gone out, he's picked up the front fence line of the properties, and obviously you can't basically have to match directly into that shape. And that might vary in terms of widths, but it'll also vary in terms of heights and crossfall, and that's the one where you can actually say, look, I want my edge of boundary to match what the surveyor's picked up, and that's the one to use there. It will match the vertical, sorry, the horizontal, the width, and also the height vertically as you need to. Now I select the string, so I'm going to say, look, to 12D, I want you to go and follow this bus bay string that I've drawn in here, in this CAD construction line here. You'll notice that I've named the string because I actually do have over here another bus bay on a different road. And 12D would get a little bit confused about which one you're trying to widen to if it wasn't named individually. So that's why you do, especially if you bring it over from CAD, you have to remember to actually go through and rename the strings or just give it a unique name so 12D will know about that. Side to search for, yes. And in terms of the changes, again, the programmers have made it a little bit easier that if you do use this lowest drop change of the modifier string, what it's asking is basically saying this is the string you've selected and I do want the first or the lowest change of that string. And you've also got the option for the highest drop change of this modifier. So it'll only occur in this modifier, and I can pick that one and apply that there. And you can see it's done exactly that. It's now widened it out. And if I turn on my tin, where's my tin for RSO1? There it is. Just toggle on the contours and quickly change some of the tin settings here. I'll go 0.1 and 0.5. Change the shading a bit, make it a bit lighter there on the screen. You can see it's just pushed the 3% crossfall out. Now it's sort of worked, but it's also missed these sort of positions here where the string that I've drafted in, my CAD string, has adjusted and hasn't actually picked up there between the 5-meter intervals. So this is where I can come back and I can actually tell 12D, look, I actually have some special points I need to be picked up, and there is an option in here or a command under interval where you can actually pick up a string's TPs. So basically I'm going to pick up the change intervals of this string. Again, you just need to say this is the string I'm interested in, the cyan one that I've drawn there, the construction string. I don't really need to tell it where it is in the world because it'll basically drop all the TP points or all the transition points across onto the center line, and it'll create new cross sections at those key points so that it does match it perfectly, in my case horizontally, but if you had vertical on it, it would match it vertically as well. So that's what's going on there. So they're probably the two modifiers that are used the most, modify link and modify to a string. Definitely the ones that are used the most. A couple of other things just to note. You might have seen me before turn off this auto pan, only because things move around. If it's turned on by default usually and you're clicking around, it'll actually jump or maneuver your screen, pan automatically to where that modifier is taking place. So if I go to the full template, you'll see it'll show the full length of the road on the left hand side. If I went to the bus bay part down here, it would take me directly to that. Well, I can already see it, so it doesn't zoom in. It basically will just show you this is where it is. Now that is easy to turn on and off, but if you do turn it off, it just means that it won't automatically pan to those locations. So it's just something to keep in mind if you do want to jump around. The other button that's quite handy down there as well is if this job's not yours, is some highlighting tools here. Because we've got lots of modifiers in here, it can grow. Basically, if you come into your friend's job, it's not your project and you don't know what the modifiers are doing, he's got lots and lots of code in there, you can come in and actually turn on this highlighting. You just click on highlight there, just set it, and it uses the mouse cursor to come across, and it'll say, hey, look, this is the modifier that is currently being used in this area. Now, as I move up to the parking, you'll see that it's actually highlighting the inserting of the string and the taper at the end. If I were to move towards the taper at the start, it just highlights those ones as well. As I move back down towards the bus bay, it highlights that one for me as well. So that's basically how that can be used, and it's quite a handy little tip again if this isn't your project and you don't know where those lines of code are. Just skipping across to the right hand side, we really haven't done anything to the right hand side at all other than insert a template so it made a shape up. But where we, I guess, are going with 12D, I guess in the last couple of versions you might have been introduced to some of the snippets. Basically, snippets are just code that's been produced and out of the library. Sorry, I might have gone in a little bit quick. It's under Design, MTF, Snippets. Edit snippet, where I want to go, is basically 12D is shipped with some snippets. It's just bits of MTF file. Like I introduced those strings before, I inserted a string. It was found that some of the users were just putting lines of code in there to produce those things, and it was thought it might be a bit easier if we can take that bit of text file, that notepad file out, and basically just wrap them up into a single file, and you can keep applying them again and again. And that's what basically a snippet is. It's just lines of MTF code, and they've been basically coded together. Now 12D comes with a library of snippets, and they're sort of in three groups. You've got this sort of INS group here for inserting things. So if you want to insert a road with a curb and gutter, or basically a roll curb, or if you just wanted something else. And once they're inserted, a verge and a path or something like that you might have in there. But after you've inserted them, you might want to come into this group for modifying them. And once the strings are developed, you might want to drop in a stormwater pit, or you might want to do some sort of curb transitioning. Now, these are obviously modifying the strings that are already produced from inserting them, and this is out of the 12D library, so it's all based off the 12D naming convention. And then we move further down into doing some of the tri-mesh, so doing the extra boxing layers and things like that. So there's some snippets that you can generate straight from 12D. They're shipped with the library. We always suggest that, like the templates, if you are going to use one, so you grab the road with the curb and gutter, it's always a good idea to basically copy the snippet, in this case out of the 12D folder, and into my working folder, into the current job. So you just highlight the one you're interested in. It might be in your company folder here, your library. Just select the one you want, come down and copy the snippet. You can rename it if you want to. I tend to just keep the same names. And if you do rename it, you might want to take that image. If that's the case, just tick on and it'll actually rename the image with it as well and copy it into your project. So you can now see in my job, I now have this new one added in there automatically for me. So I can now utilize it. The snippets are a little bit more flexible than the templates, but the templates still 100% work, but we are finding that more and more users are moving towards the snippets. So I'll just put in a comment here, insert snippets. And the snippets live at this, as I said, the very top level. So before where we went in, we inserted the template, I'm just going to come in and insert the snippet, and I'm going to insert this one with the road, curb and gutter. And the snippets are interesting because they've been programmed to ask the user, exactly what they want. In my case, do I want a road that's 3.5 meters wide? I might not want that for this road. Do you want 3% crossfall? And then you've even got choices in terms of, okay, do you want a curb and gutter or did you want a curb only? So this one's been pre-programmed to have a whole lot of different scenarios built into it, where a template's pretty static, and even though you can take it from project to project, it means that for different roads, you might even have to have different templates. So this one's very dynamic across multiple different road types and possibly, or different possible setups. So if I run that and apply, you'll notice that I'll get that. I'm just getting the curb and gutter, and it's the -3. If I was to change it to 3%, you can see how quite quick it is. You can basically get a one-way crossfall happening. So very quick and easy with one snippet. You don't need multiple templates or anything, you just change the answers. I'll also introduce another snippet or produce another snippet in here, and it's in the list there. It was the V path, the one that put in the footpath. Again, this comes up to the user and asks, again, different questions about, okay, did you just want a grass verge? If that's the case and I apply it, then I'll just get the one string and it'll be 1 meter wide, or I could have no footpath there, that's fine. But if you did want a footpath, then I could put in a width of the footpath that I want. And if I wanted landscaping behind that footpath, maybe I want 2 meters of landscaping as well behind the footpath there, then it creates the correct number of strings. Now you'll notice one thing for the users also, if you're new to 12D, is that unlike the templates, this doesn't give you a chance to name anything. All the strings that are generated, if I come here and click on there, and the colors, they're already been set or predetermined in the snippet. So again, if you are using snippets, well, it gets around that problem of not naming things consistently from project to project. That sort of locks people into naming conventions and colors and everything that will then work for future parts of their project. So I just wanted to show the snippets. They're very much like templates that once they're there, or introduced or inserted into that, you can just come in and modify them as you need to. You can just come in and modify. The strings that are produced are just links. So I can then come in and modify them however I need to. The last one I wanted to show before we're running out of time, and I'm sure hopefully you've got some questions for me. Going to kill me with questions. I'm going to come down to this intersection because I guess one of the other things that people want to do is often remove strings. So yeah, we can insert the strings individually if you want to, but the other thing with intersections, often you want to remove strings. And I wanted to show this one, remove from a name, because often you'll know the string that you wanted to remove from, and you basically just want to delete the strings through the intersection and tidy it up. And this one was put in there for intersections. So it's under fixed, remove, leave the fixed strings, but remove anything from this name. So you'll see how it works. The link, You might have noticed that this one doesn't have the brackets with the S in it because I can only pick one string. So it's a really subtle thing when the panel pops up at the very top. It'll actually tell you whether that modifier can be used over multiple strings or only one string. So this one obviously is only looking for the one string answer, which happens to be the lip of the curve on the right, and everything outside of that is literally going to be blown away. Now I don't want it to happen over the whole range, so again this is where you use the smart changes and say, look, I want it the lowest and the highest. The lowest of this curve return, so I would have dropped both ends, but this is obviously the lowest end. And the curve return on the other side here, I've got another one here, this would be the high answer. So that would be the low answer back onto the cell line, and this would be the highest change answer that it would apply. And there we go. It would then delete the strings through that section of the row design. And that just cleans up the intersection. So I wanted to leave it with that one. Obviously, it's also pretty handy. There's lots of other modifiers in there, but for an introduction, I just wanted to cover those ones. Hopefully you've got some questions for me, and I'll just hand back to Lisa if that's okay.
Thanks, Rod. Just go to time, we'll just take one of these questions live. Tara in Queensland has asked, when adjusting the width of the road at the parking bay, what sort of modifier would you use to maintain the longitudinal crossfall at the curb invert?
So I think the question was related back to, the parking bay here. The modifier that I picked, it basically just said to hold the crossfall. But if you're actually wanting a vertical on that string out there, I guess there's two ways to do it. Like the bus bay that I had further down here, you could draft in the string, the location of where it is, and actually put some vertical on there. Once it's got some vertical, you can match the string like I did before with the modify to a string. You could then say to get the lip of the curve to modify out to it, but not just hold the width. You could also get it to take the height of that string that you've independently graded. And that way, it's often the way that it's done, because then you want to give that string in a long section to the surveyor so they can actually set that string out independently to what's happening at the center line. The other method is in there. You can do it if you wish. I'll just pop into it. Pop open this box here under fixed, where you've got some options where you can go to and actually put in two heights. Again, it's getting a little bit more advanced, but you can actually nominate what the heights are. So again, you can tell the length that you want, and if you want to, you can actually say, look, I'm happy with the start. So again, we're talking about this bus bay up here. I'm happy with the start position, but I don't want it, sorry, let me go into the vertical. I want to adjust the height and hold it here. And you basically can say, look, I want to hold that height, the position, and push that forward. And basically whatever the position was, you could actually maintain that forward. It would actually become flat, whatever the answer was there. Or another option you've got where you can actually take the RL and the grade there, or the position and the grade, and actually then grade it up or down. So you get these options to actually grade up or down. It's a little bit more advanced, but you actually do have options within the modifiers to independently grade strings so that they're separate to what the reference string was. I hope that's covered it.
Great, thanks Rod. And thanks to the audience for your great questions. Sorry to those we couldn't get to live today. We'll answer you by email later. The recording of this webinar will be available in coming days through our website and our YouTube channel. Our next two training webinars are 12D Track Part 2 on the 9th of February and Pavement Design for Construction on the 22nd of February. Plus, we'll be kicking off our 2017 Industry Solutions series in between those two. So do keep an eye on our website for details of all of those. We'll also continue to keep you posted through email and social media. If you need to contact us in the meantime, our details are on the screen now. That concludes our presentation for today. Thank you for attending, and we hope to see you at future webinars.